The autumn sun bathed the quiet streets of the small town as Mark Henderson drove his convertible down the main avenue. A successful businessman of 47 years, with grey hair at the temples and keen brown eyes, he felt a strange nostalgia as he passed by places he hadn't seen in over 2 decades. "Why did I come back?" he whispered to himself, adjusting his wristwatch. The company's board had suggested several metropolises for the new branch, all with tax advantages and perfect infrastructure. Even so, Mark insisted on that small town, surprising everyone. Something called him back, like a distant melody he couldn't identify, but that kept echoing in his dreams. He parked in front of a modernized cafe and looked out the window. It used to be Mr. Collins' diner where he had tasted his first sundae. Now it boasted a colourful sign and metal tables. He continued driving, noticing how each corner held pieces of memories he thought were forgotten. That's when he spotted the Riverside butcher shop. The weathered wooden facade still bore the same sign from when he was a teenager. An inexplicable impulse made him park and get out of the car. The doorbell jingled as he entered. The familiar aroma of sawdust and fresh meat instantly transported him back to his 17-year-old self. He was almost leaving, convinced it had been a mistake, when a woman behind the counter turned around. "Can I help?" The words died on her lips. "Mark! Mark Henderson!" The world seemed to spin in slow motion. Thelma Reynolds. Her brown hair was shorter now, with some silver strands, but her green eyes remained vivid like polished emeralds. She almost dropped the tray of steaks she was holding. "Thelma," he responded with a surprised smile, "after so much time." Time had been kind to her. The fine lines around her eyes told stories of laughter and lived experiences. She wore a simple apron over a light blue blouse, but carried a dignity that made her elegant even in that work environment. "I can't believe you came back," she said, placing the tray on the counter. "How long?" "Wow, how long?" "More than 20 years, he stated, moving closer. "The butcher shop is still in the family, it seems." They chatted right there, among cuts of meat and shy smiles. Thelma shared that she had been married for 22 years to Richard, a local history teacher, and that she had 5 daughters. The triplets, Victoria, Sophie and Claire, already graduated, were 23 years old. The oldest, Emily, was 25 and finishing her postgraduate studies. Diane, the youngest, was just 16 and exceptionally intelligent, but still very young. Mark shared that he was in his second marriage, with Hannah for 6 years. He had no children. He mentioned his technology and engineering company with a simplicity that belied his true success. "I heard about your company," Thelma commented, wiping her hands on her apron. "It seems you've achieved your dreams. And now you're going to open a branch here," Mark confirmed, leaning on the counter. "It's a way to return to the roots under the guise of business," he confessed. "I've always liked it here, despite leaving the way I did." A silence heavy with memories hung between them. Thelma seemed to hesitate, lightly biting her lower lip. A habit Mark was surprised he still remembered. "Mark," she finally said, "3 of my daughters have graduated and are looking for opportunities. Emily is still finishing college but is very dedicated. Would it be too much to ask you to consider interviewing them for your new headquarters?" Mark realized that, although the request came with a pleading tone, the butcher shop seemed well established. Times were tough for many family businesses like that one. "Of course," he replied with a genuine smile. "In 2 months the office will be ready, and in 3 we will start operating. They would have a fair chance, like any candidate." Thelma's face lit up with gratitude that made Mark feel a pang in his chest. They exchanged contacts, and he promised to call when the interviews were scheduled. As he left the butcher shop, Mark felt strange. That reunion had awakened something dormant, like an old song whose lyrics slowly began to return to memory. That night, the Reynolds house was bustling. The dining table, covered with a crocheted tablecloth made by Thelma's grandmother, gathered the entire family. The smell of beef stew filled the modest yet cozy environment. "You won't believe who showed up at the butcher shop today," Thelma commented, serving Richard, a broad-shouldered man with a well-trimmed beard. The identical triplets, with their blonde hair and delicate features, looked on with curiosity. Emily, with her wavy brown hair and expressive eyes, glanced up from her book. Only little Diane remained focused on her advanced math task. "Mark Henderson," Thelma revealed, sitting down. Richard stopped eating, his expression subtly hardening. The one who left for the capital? The one who became a businessman, leaving various loose ends behind? Sophie and Claire watched from afar, giving the space their sister needed. Thelma kept a close watch with a heavy heart, but was grateful. Richard stayed apart, but when he saw Emily smiling after a meeting with Mark, he couldn't deny the peace in her eyes. Time, with its silent patience, was healing the wounds. And without haste, Emily learned that she didn't have to choose between one or the other. She had two fathers, one who had been by her side since her first step, and another who relearned to walk with her, even if just now. Sometimes reconnecting with the past doesn't bring easy answers, but it opens paths for necessary healing. The truth can hurt, but it is forgiveness, even if difficult and gradually built, that allows new bonds to flourish. And love, when it's true, doesn't compete. It adds, embraces, and transforms. Thelma nodded, excitedly talking about the meeting and the possibility of interviews for the daughters. Victoria, Sophie, and Claire immediately celebrated, discussing their resumes and plans. Emily smiled discreetly, not showing the same exuberant enthusiasm as her sisters, but there was a curious sparkle in her eyes. When the girls left, Richard questioned Thelma with an uncommon coldness. "Do you really think it's a good idea? That man abandoned everything, the city and the people, and now he comes back as if he owns everything. I don't want our daughters involved." Thelma placed her hand on his. "They are real opportunities, Richard. Think about their future." "Everything will be fine, Richard." Richard replied harshly. "I don't want my daughters involved with him or in his company." That night, lying next to his wife, Richard stared at the ceiling with open eyes. Thelma's heavy breathing indicated that she was not sleeping. Her heart was restless. The next morning, Richard approached Thelma while she was making coffee. "I'm sorry," he said, hugging her from behind. "I was unfair yesterday. The girls can go to the interviews. You're right about the opportunities." Thelma turned around and hugged him, relieved. In her eyes there was gratitude, but also something else, a shadow of concern that she was trying to hide. Weeks later, Mark called. His voice over the phone sounded professional but warm. He explained that there would only be one vacancy for now, but he would like to meet the 4 eldest daughters. There would be 3 days of tests and interviews. On the first day, Victoria, Sophie, and Claire arrived prepared like warriors ready for battle. Dressed in elegant suits, they mastered languages and displayed a natural confidence in the technical interviews. Emily, wearing a simple navy blue dress, was more reserved in her responses, but it was with Mark that she talked most during the informal lunch. Something about her presence attracted him, a genuine serenity that contrasted with the competitive anxiety of the other candidates. "What book are you currently reading?" Mark asked Emily, noticing the volume in her bag. "The Lord of the Rings," she replied with a shy smile. "It's the 3rd time I'm reading it. I really like it too. I love the twists. And the interactions, the moments of action, it all seems perfect," she added, her eyes shining. That night, in his temporary apartment, Mark couldn't sleep. Something about that young woman intrigued him deeply. It was as if he were facing a familiar enigma. On the second day of testing, he returned to observe the candidates' performance. Victoria, Sophie, and Claire continued to demonstrate technical excellence. Emily struggled with some practical tests, but she surprised with her creativity and sensitivity in case analyses. During a break, while chatting informally with Emily about her background, she mentioned her age. "I turn 26 next month," she said, checking some notes. Mark stopped, suddenly alert. He did a quick mental calculation. 25 years. 7 months after he left the city. A chill ran through his body. He and Thelma had ended things without big fights, but abruptly. Both young, Mark full of ambition, wanting to conquer the world beyond that small town. He said he couldn't take Thelma with him but would return to get her. A few days later, he called to break up. The separation was with few words but definitive. It was hard to imagine that goodbye had left such a deep mark. Observing Emily more closely, he began to notice unsettling similarities. The way she slightly tilted her head when listening intently, the habit of discreetly scratching her left eyebrow when focused, even the tone of the laughter he had just heard when someone told a joke. His heart tightened. He needed to know. In his makeshift office, with trembling hands, he dialed Thelma's number. "Thelma." His voice was deep, controlled. "I need to ask you something. About Emily." Silence on the other end. "Emily," he continued, his voice almost faltering. "Is she my daughter?" The silence stretched on, heavy and painful. When Thelma finally responded, her voice was choked. "Yes, Mark, Emily is your daughter." The shock left him momentarily speechless. Then came the anger. "Why did you never tell me?" His voice rose. "I would have come back. I would have taken responsibility. You took that away from me for 25 years, Thelma." "Mark, please understand." "Understand what?" he interrupted. "That you hid my daughter from me. That another man raised her thinking she was his. That is unforgivable. I'm going to tell her the truth right now." "Mark, no!" Thelma pleaded in tears. "Please, don't do this. Let me tell her. Today. Richard and we decided to tell her today." But he had already hung up, consumed by the anger and pain of a lifetime lost. Thelma was desperate. She called repeatedly. On the 5th attempt, he answered. His voice was still trembling, but it was more controlled. "Don't you think my reaction is justified?" he said. It's 25 years lost, Thelma," Mark said. "I know," she sobbed, "but let me fix this. Just a few more hours. Promise me?" After a long sigh, he agreed. "I will respect that, for her sake." On the 3rd day, Mark entered the conference room with a different look, no longer that of an executive assessing talents, but that of a man carrying the weight of a revelation that had changed his entire perception of the past and present. When the moment arrived to announce who would get the position, the triplets straightened up in their chairs, ready for the victory they felt they deserved due to their impeccable technical performance. Mark looked at Emily, who maintained a serene expression, seemingly prepared for rejection. "The position is yours, Emily," he announced, his voice betraying more emotion than would be appropriate in a professional context. She was momentarily at a loss for words, while her sisters, surprised but gracious, clapped and ran to hug her. Thelma, sitting discreetly at the back of the room for the final announcement, covered her face with her hands. Richard, next to her, gripped her shoulder tightly, as if seeking stability. Emily thanked everyone, visibly disconcerted by the unexpected choice. When Mark hugged her to congratulate her, the embrace lasted longer than protocol would allow, a silence loaded with meanings she did not yet understand. That night, Thelma and Richard sat down with Emily. "Daughter," Thelma began with a choked voice, "we need to tell you something. Something we should have told you before." Emily settled on the sofa, confused by the heavy atmosphere. The silence was deafening. Suddenly, "Mark is your biological father." The silence returned, as if the world had hit the pause button. "What?" she whispered. "But the man who raised you," said Richard with tearful eyes. "It's me. It always has been. I have loved you as my daughter since the moment I held you in my arms." Emily took a few seconds to absorb this, but as she looked at the two of them, she realized that the love in that room was real. Shocked, yes, confused, but not broken. She hugged them, first Richard, then Thelma. And she cried. A lot. The next morning, Mark was waiting at the door of the new office. When he saw Emily arriving with Thelma, his heart raced, but the pain was still there. When she stopped in front of him, he hugged her. His expression was stern. "Why didn't you tell me?" He snapped at Thelma. "You had the right to know. I had the right to know. 25 years of silence, Thelma." "I know," she began, tears in her eyes. "No, you don't know. You took my daughter away from me. You stole something from me that cannot be returned. You had my contact information. You knew where my parents lived. You could have sent a letter, an email, anything. I tried," she whispered. "It wasn't enough." Mark's face was red. "And you know what? I should sue you. For omission. For hiding my daughter from me. You made me lose everything." Thelma stepped back as if she had been slapped. She was about to respond when Emily placed herself between the two. "Enough!" she shouted. Mark looked at her, surprised. "Mark," she said, her eyes brimming with tears. "You disappeared. You just left. My mother tried to contact you. She sent letters, called, looked for you in places she knew. You vanished. She was left alone, young, scared. And she had to make difficult decisions. Alone." "She could have insisted," he murmured, his voice lower. "She did insist," Emily affirmed. "But you were already living a different life, and she thought that protecting me meant moving on. Richard raised me with love, never let me lack anything. And my mother? She suffered. Do you think she had a malicious plan? She was afraid of being rejected, afraid of disturbing you, afraid of not knowing how to find you, and afraid of seeing me suffer if you didn't want to accept me. I thought I wanted to meet you, but if you don't respect my mother, you won't have my respect either." Mark widened his eyes, surprised. "I don't want to work here. I don't accept the position, and for now I don't want any more contact." I just wish I had been there," he said in a whisper. Mark swallowed hard. He looked at Thelma, who was silently crying a few steps away. Emily went. When Emily got home and told everything, Richard was furious. "I knew it! I said we shouldn't get involved with him. That man left and now comes back as if he had some right." Thelma tried to intervene, but Richard left the room, irritated. In the weeks that followed, silence took over the house. The atmosphere was very tense. Emily continued with her routine, but there was something different about her, more introspective. In the moments alone with her mother, she would stare intently at some distant point and occasionally ask questions. "Does he like to read?" she would ask. "When was the last time he came to town before this? He left out of pride, didn't he?" And sometimes, without any questions, she would just cry. One night, lying next to her mother, she whispered, "I know he wronged you. But, even so, I want to meet him." Thelma caressed her hair. "I know, my love. Do you think Daddy—" She hesitated. "Richard will accept." The next day, Emily called Richard to talk. They sat on the sofa facing each other. She spoke honestly. "I know what he did, and I know what a wonderful father you have been. You are the one I call Dad. You always will be. But there's a part of me that wants to understand where I came from, wants to know who he is." Richard looked at her, his eyes brimming with tears. He remained silent for long seconds. Then he got up, walked around the sofa and hugged her tightly. "You will always be my daughter. Nothing will change that." Emily cried on his chest. That same night, Thelma picked up the phone and called Mark. He answered in silence. On the other end, her voice, firm but gentle. "Emily wants to meet you." On the other side of the line, Mark's breathing became heavier. After a moment he responded, with the calmest voice Thelma had ever heard. "Thelma, I wish I had handled everything better. I was angry, yes, but I reflected and realized I was wrong. Not just in how I spoke to you, but in abandoning everything here. I shouldn't have left like that. We can't change the past, she said calmly. But maybe we can fix something in the present. Whenever she wants, I'll be here. On the agreed day, Mark arrived early and waited in a small cafe near the central square. His hands were sweaty. His heart felt like it was going to burst out of his chest. Emily arrived minutes later. Her eyes were steady, her chin was up. Hi. Hi, he replied, standing up. I'm here because I want to get to know you, but I want to make it clear. You will never replace Richard. Mark nodded, feeling the weight and justice of those words. It's not my intention, I just want you to know that if you ever want to, I will be around. She crossed her arms. The silence between the two was dense. Do you want me to forgive you? I do. But only when it's your time. Today I just want to apologize. For leaving. For not being present. For everything. Emily remained silent. After a few seconds, she sat down at the table. Then start by telling me a story from your childhood. Mark smiled, thrilled. It was a beginning. It wasn't easy. The conversations were sporadic, laden with care and still sensitive scars. Sometimes, Emily would shut down. Other times, he didn't know what to say. But they persisted. Quick lunches turned into late afternoon walks. Stifled laughter turned into shared memories. If you enjoyed the story, please leave a comment with a rating from 1 to 5 to show how much you liked it. Also, watch the video that is now appearing on your screen. See you soon.